Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to CCG. My name is Shirley Ren. I'm the director of CCG Publishing Center. So welcome everyone. Today is our great honor to host this CCG book dialogue between Dr. Henry Wang and Dr. Harvey Dzodin. Dr. Wang is a founder and president of CCG, so let's warmly welcome him to join Dr. Dzodin and have this wonderful book dialogue. Dr. Wang, please.
Thank you, Shirley, and good afternoon to distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and of course our dear friend Harvey. I know you are now in Vienna, but hope it's not too early for you. It's good for you to join us. We would like to conduct this CCG book dialogue. You know that you've been writing this marvelous book, Dreaming the Dragons or Meddlesome Mandarins, a journey together to uncover China's soul. So this is really a fascinating book. So it's my really great pleasure to welcome you all here to celebrate the publication. And also we have an explanation of this Dr. Harvey Dzodin's new book that I just mentioned. So a book is just more than a collection of words on paper. It's really a journey and a conversation and a bridge between the author and his readers. So I would like to first congratulate Harvey, which is an old friend, for your great book. So Dr. Harvey Dzodin is a senior fellow of Center for China and Globalization. We are very proud to have you, and also we've been seeing you go through this process of writing this great book, as well as you are a Vienna-based freelance columnist and commentator for China Daily, CGTN TV, and CGTN Radio, and many other global media. He's also the chairman of Austria-based Earth Care Culture Association. So very, very interesting organization. Dr. Dzodin was appointed by the 39th US President Jimmy Carter as his lawyer on a presidential committee. So this is really a very impressive post. Later, after being nominated by the White House and the US Department of State, he worked at the United Nations office in Vienna. He also served as a director and vice president of ABC TV network in New York for more than 20 years, during which time he vividly participated in the activities of Council of Foreign Relations and the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs. Harvey is very diligent and hardworking. He has published over 400 op-eds focusing on the international affairs, Sino-US relations, and Belt and Road Initiative, and arts and culture. He's a sought-after speaker and consultant in China and abroad. American Biography Institute named Dr. Dzodin one of the great thinkers of the 21st century. So really very impressive, Harvey. I remember seeing you in Vienna last year and also before, and we are very pleased now you joined our book series, which I'm very proud to have to include this book into the Springer Nature's China and Globalization book series, which myself and Dr. Mel have been the editor. And of course also I know you had Professor Jeffrey Sachs wrote an op-ed, no, as a preface for you of this book, which is great. Jeffrey Sachs also is an old friend. He was spoke at our think tank meeting last year, and he's coming to CCG again on the March 20th in Beijing. We're going to see you also in Beijing later of this month, but we hope you stay around for the March 20th.
I look forward to that. Yes, I'll be there. Okay.
So probably maybe let's start because we're going to have this book dialogue, and then we'll hear from you, of course, and then we can raise some questions. We have our colleagues here, our friends, and they may ask you also questions. So why don't you start give us a brief introduction of your latest new book. Harvey, please.
Absolutely. I'm really happy and honored to do that. And Henry, I congratulate you on joining the advisory board of a think tank here in Vienna, Global Neighbors. I think it's a perfect match, and it's another bridge that you and Mabel and CCG are building. I have to say, though, that I owe you and Mabel and CCG staff a big thank you for encouraging me to write this book. I know that this event is the book launch of my book, but I also see it as the approaching of my proud decade of association with the Center for China and Globalization. Back then, CCG, like China was earlier in the 1980s, was still on a very steep ascent to where it is today. You and Mabel have had your own Chinese dream and have largely achieved it as a consequence of your and CCG staff's really tireless efforts. And as I point out in the book, CCG has indeed become one of the most highly rated and respected think tanks, not only in China, not only in Asia, but in the world. I remember that you used to ask me to introduce you to this or that ambassador or influential foreigner. Now I call you because CCG is known by the entire diplomatic corps and indeed by leaders and media all over the world. As today you're on the BBC World Service. But yet I know for CCG, as for China, that the best is yet to come. And I'm especially appreciative to Shirley Wren and her staff for their precious guidance and advice in writing my book. It was a labor of love, but a labor that required some guidance. I wrote this book because I'm angry. I'm angry that much of the Western media of which I was a part have not portrayed China accurately based on my nearly 2 decades living in China. This helps fuel the animosity that I felt and still feel living in Vienna since 2020. A few weeks ago, a good friend of mine here, a journalist, was thrown out of the Austrian Journalist Club merely because he was pro-Chinese. That shouldn't be. We, the world, are facing too many shared existential threats like an environmental apocalypse, nuclear extinction, another pandemic, and now runaway AI. So we shouldn't be wasting precious time relitigating the Cold War or conducting any war for that matter. I aim this book squarely at young people because they're not only our future, but they have a more open mind about China. And lately, many of them are even indulging in becoming Chinese on TikTok and other social media. And that fact actually says a lot. In the book, we go on a journey to uncover China's essence. But I can tell you the book's bottom line. All countries are a changing mixture of good, bad, and ugly at any given point in time. But that China has uniquely lifted more people out of extreme poverty than any other country. And China continues to serve its people well. In fact, Chinese people in international survey after survey rate the performance of their own government led by the Communist Party of China more highly than others rate their government's performance. Cicero, the great Roman statesman, scholar, and philosopher, said, "Salus populi suprema lex esto," or "the welfare of the people shall be the supreme law." Chairman Mao maybe said that more concisely in 1944 when he said, "Wei Renmen Fu Wu," serve the people. Westerners find it hard to believe this truth, given all the propaganda and falsehoods they're exposed to. I even point out that the Democracy Perception Index, which is published by an NGO headed by a former Danish prime minister and former NATO secretary general, found that in their survey, respondents in China have very positive opinions about their own political system. 92% say that democracy is important to them. 91% say that their government serves the interests of most people rather than a few. 85% say all people have equal rights in China before the law. And 79% say China is democratic. Moreover, in the DPI, Chinese respondents are more positive than those in the US and in most European countries on these points. Chinese respondents, in fact, had some of the most positive results globally. In the book, I tell my readers about Sir Thomas More, Henry VIII's able Lord Chancellor, who wrote the book Utopia, meaning nowhere in Greek, because no country is perfect. He himself certainly didn't live in a utopia. King Henry had him beheaded. I'm not asking my readers to believe me or anyone who talks about China, because seeing is believing. The only way to really know China is to see it in person, now that it's so easy to do. I just try to whet the appetite of my readers to do that and make their own judgments with their own eyes. I've had opportunities to preview the book here in Vienna at the Diplomatic Academy and the University of Vienna. Audiences here know that China is ancient, but they seem to think that China has always been poor, when in fact, as we discuss in the book, that except for the century of humiliation, China was the or a global economic superpower. Some in the audience found this astounding. People are obviously not taught that China preceded ancient Greece and Rome by thousands of years, that over 9,000 years ago, China was an organized society engaging in agriculture, that its written history dates back 3,500 years, and that dynastic China began roughly 4 millennia ago. People are obviously still not taught about how high-tech ancient China was. For example, the compass dating back to the 4th century BCE. By contrast, it eventually appeared in Europe here 1,600 years later. Or take papermaking, invented in China in the 2nd century CE, but which came here in Europe 900 years later. Or gunpowder, invented in China in the 9th century, coming to Europe 4 centuries after that. And movable type, invented in China in the 11th century. Gutenberg, as we know, however, was famously miscredited with this invention because he didn't even do that until 4 centuries later. The book discusses Chairman Mao and his pragmatic successor, Deng Xiaoping, as well as red letter days in modern China's history, including the PRC's founding, as well as UN Resolution 2758, which, despite the futile efforts of the U.S. to the contrary, expelled Chiang Kai-shek's Republic of China from the UN system and installed the People's Republic of China as the sole representative of the Chinese people in 1971. We examine Hong Kong's return to China on July 1, 1997, CCTV documentary series Deng Xiaoping at History's Crossroads, wherein the British Governor General of Hong Kong tells me as Callahan that China was certainly going to renew the 99-year lease forced at gunpoint on a humiliated China in 1898, because 1980s China still desperately needed advanced British technology. It was shocking to me that the British Foreign Office, after all the decades and centuries of dealing with and dueling with China, still didn't get it, and in fact were clueless about Chinese culture. They should have known that the loss of face inflicted on China by the British in the 19th century was a festering wound that had stung deeply for a century, and that China would stop at nothing to restore its honor at the earliest opportunity. We examined President Nixon's visit to China in February 1972, that we now know as the week that changed the world, and the little-known protocol-shattering handshake on the tarmac of Beijing's capital airport that helped smooth Sino-U.S. negotiations to a successful conclusion, resulting in the Shanghai Communique, which, among other things, pledged that both former enemies would work towards the normalization of relations based on the principles of mutual respect, non-aggression, and non-interference in internal affairs, as well as equality and peaceful coexistence. In it, the U.S. acknowledged that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwanese Strait maintain there is but one China and Taiwan is a part of China. We examined China's entry into the World Trade Organization in December 2001 that marked a significant turning point in the country's economic development and its integration into global economy. We examined China's two centennial goals, first proposed under President Jiang Zemin in September 1997, when they were purely aspirational, and the achievement of the first in 2021 under President Xi to build a moderately prosperous society in all respects. That's the ancient Chinese goal of building a Shaokong society, roughly equivalent to our idea of middle class. We shine a light on President Xi's Chinese dream of national rejuvenation and his Belt and Road Initiative. We look at China's amazing progress from one of the planet's most economically challenged and polluted countries, complete with the airpocalypse that you and I lived through in Beijing. We examine China's whole process people's democracy that is very much in action this week, that derives from its unique culture, history, and national circumstances, and how it emphasizes that the act of voting is only one dimension of participation in the political process, and how it places significant weight on citizen involvement in a multiplicity of channels, such as being consulted and providing input on issues that touch people's lives, and thus help maximize the possibility that the interests of a wide variety of stakeholders are in fact well represented. And we explore the secret sauce of China that has propelled the country's leadership in so many fields, such as AI, EVs, rare earths, space exploration, and defense. Since 1949, it's the 5-year plan model that's been China's continually improved and refined master compass, charting the country's path in 5-year increments, as is being done at the NPC this week as we're speaking. Rather than coming from on high, 5-year plans are a multi-year, bottom-up collaborative process, now including significant online input from Chinese citizens and government officials, academic experts, think tanks, and other stakeholders who discuss and debate China's near and longer-term future to guide the country's development. Based on these inputs, 5-year plans undergo numerous revisions, and 5-year plans are the standard against which China's progress can be continually monitored and measured. But don't believe me. Maybe take the word of someone much more famous who Henry has mentioned, Jeffrey Sachs, who wrote in the foreword, in which he says in part, "What Harvey tells you in this book, with which I concur, based on my own observations and studies, is that China's successes were the result of decades of hard work, high saving rates, good governance, skillful planning, and remarkable entrepreneurship. With Harvey as their guide, readers will come to appreciate the the riches of a great civilization that is keen to recover from the mishaps of 19th and 20th centuries, and notably from the violence unleashed on China by Western powers and then later by Japan. They will come to appreciate China's great civilizational wisdom, and like Harvey and myself, root for China's continued successes, confident that China's successes will indeed benefit all the world. So in the book, I urge my young readers not to believe Jeffrey Sachs or me, but to go and see for themselves if China's 1.4 billion people are dreaming dragons or meddlesome mandarins.
Great. Thank you, Harvey, for your very exciting introduction of your book, but also lots of your observations. And I think you gave a review of the history of China, but also you really attach that with your personal experience of more than living 2 decades in China, several decades in the US, and of course now past 6 years in Europe. A great global watch and observer for the differences and of course the competitive advantage of each other. So that's really marvelous. You mentioned about the 5 years plan. Actually, this year is the launching of the new 15th 5 years plan, which is started a new quarter. Actually, we just finished a quarter last year. And then now the new quarter. Actually, I was at CGTN this morning, a live coverage of Premier Li Chang's working report. You can see China now emphasizes a lot of high quality rather than high speed. They set a target of a GDP growth to 4.5 to 5% 2026. So you can see a lot of exercise going on. You're right. You talk about it's a detailed planning and numerous consultations, activities. It's probably one of the key success factors of China. So not only that, there's a meritocracy, there's entrepreneurship you mentioned, of course, education, and all those things. So to start, I want to ask you about this the title and the central metaphor of this book. The title of your book, Dreaming Dragons and the Meddlesome Mandarins, presents a powerful and poetic dichotomy. And so could you elaborate on what inspired this specific pairing, and what do you hope the Western readers will understand China after contemplating those two figures together? Perhaps you can, let's get some stuff on the book now.
Sure. I really thought long and hard about the title. And so I chose this title because to many Westerners, dragons conjure up images of terrifying monsters. However, in China and in much of Asia, dragons are entirely different. For millennia, Chinese dragons have been revered mythical creatures symbolizing good fortune, prosperity, power, and wisdom. Far from being feared, the dragon has been celebrated as a symbol of fertility, a guardian of the people, and emblematic of the emperor. In stories and art, dragons have soared among clouds, controlled rain and rivers, embodied justice, kindness, and the promise of abundance. In China, to dream of dragons has meant dreaming of greatness, dreaming of hope, and dreaming of unity. The second half of the title introduces another figure often misunderstood in the West, the Mandarin. In English, Mandarin often means an out-of-touch bureaucrat or a self-important official. But the original meaning is richer and more complex. In imperial China, a mandarin was an official selected through an extraordinarily difficult examination based on Confucian learning, open to all men regardless of their economic or social status. These mandarins were the core of China's imperial government for millennia, overseeing many aspects of people's lives from birth to death. Mandarins were not simply passive paper shuffling bureaucrats. They were expected to be ethical, educated, proactive, and wise, as Chinese leaders are expected to do this very day, this very week, this very time.
That's very, very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I think you had a great pair. Of course, dragon many times symbolize China and its vitality and its vigor and full of energy and things like that. But I really, impressed by the Mandarin that you choose. As you are right, Mandarin sometimes has been interpreted as a bureaucratic system. Doesn't really know what they are doing. But as a matter of fact, in China invented the Mandarin system, and then through this meritocracy that you talked about, that years, they have to be selected and to the official system. In old days, if you really practice learning and read Confucius culture and books, you can excel in exam, and you can be you can be the prime minister of the country based on your exams. So I think
It's true.
this is so important that the Chinese system is based on exam performance, on exam ballots, rather than go to the sometimes ordinary ballot. But even today, we had about 15 million young people, high school graduates. 13 million of them actually took the exam, went to the university, getting the elite system. And every year, the government actually recruit about 200,000 officials of all levels, so-called mandarins. 3 million students, college graduates, took the exam to do that. And then furthermore, so this Mandarin system in China, the bureaucratic system in China, you don't have to, their promotion is not based on your speech or good writing. You got to deliver and perform from the village, from the county, from the municipality, province to the central government. It's all every 5 years, every 3 years, there's a level that goes up. So absolutely. So you discover a very great phenomena that China's success factor there. I really think very interesting. I have another question on your personal journey of discovery. In your preface of the book, you describe your first trip to China in 1996, which is 30 some years ago, as feeling like Columbus suddenly finding new oceans. As someone who had lived through the entire of the Cold War and worked at the highest level of American media and the government, what was the most shocking and profound moment that shattered your previous perceptions and set you to this path of discovery, Harvey?
Well, this was a wonderful journey. I was happy to see China as it was and to see its development to where it is today. It's an incredible story. In the West, we get bombarded with misinformation about China, and I can attest that my experience in China for those decades is completely at odds with most of the narrative that the West feeds its people. And I think that that's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate because we need to work together on so many issues, existential issues, rather than diverting our attention to relitigating the Cold War and stuff like that. So I think that my journey of discovery is that China is not what is in the Western media, but that China is a beautiful country full of beautiful people and interesting people who have been at the top of the world in global history, but who were kept down by the West during the Opium Wars and the century of humiliation. to now rise again to reclaim the position that they had for so many centuries. And I think that we can also take comfort in what I found, and that is, I don't think China wants to be the global hegemon. I don't think China wants to be the policeman of the world. I think China would like to be a global leader, not the global leader. And I think China has a lot to offer, and its history has a lot to offer. Because as Jeffrey Sachs points out in the introduction, China never had wars externally except to protect its borders, like with the Great Wall. Most of the struggles were internal struggles. I think people in the West don't know that, and that they should know that basically China is back to where it was and even beyond that. And China has a great sense of history and destiny. You can see it in President Xi in a lot of his pronouncements. You can see it in the common people who work so hard to make China a success, whether they're CEOs of high-tech companies or whether they're taxi drivers driving EVs in Beijing, Shanghai, and other cities. This is almost baked into China's DNA. I would have never known that just from watching the media or reading posts online or in the newspaper.
Yeah. Thank you, Harvey. Your observation is absolutely right. Yeah. Yes, I think that's true. Historically, China is always a nation settled on their land. Cultivating land. It's an agricultural-based country. Confucius also valued the society that you have to, if your parents are alive, don't travel far away, and then if you have to cultivate a few crops, a few seasons on the Yangtze River Basin or Yellow River Basin, you can't leave your homeland, even your home village. So they're not really a Norman nation, a nation on the horse. They're going to always conquer, or expedition on the voyage and things like that in the ocean. So that's true. The culture and the local characteristic that shaped the Chinese culture is basically keep yourself growing, but then also try to look after others. There's the expansionist mode is not in the DNA of Chinese culture. For example, the Marshal Zhenghe has actually, in the Ming Dynasty, has 7 expeditions voyage over far from China, but never stayed or occupied any places or colonized any places. So I think China still today practice that. But you talk about on the soul of China. Your book is a journey to discover China's soul. After decades of traveling across the country, from grassland of the Inner Mongolia to Buddhist monasteries, and building deep friendship with everyone from academic to artist. So what do you think of the most fundamental driving force behind Chinese soul or Chinese spirit that you have discovered? Is this the pragmatism you talked about, or is something deeper in the cultural code?
You talked about DNA before, and I think China's DNA is very much based on its long history, its history of achievement, its history of learning, its history of actually helping to connect other nations through the Silk Road. And so China is in a pivotal position these days. I think the world can learn a lot from China. If you look at, for example, President Xi's various initiatives, you can see China's values, and these values are based on ancient beliefs updated to today. And because of those values, China is going all in on achievement. It's actually an achievement that worries some people in the West. And I've asked people in my presentations when I previewed the book here, but didn't get an answer. Why is it that the West is so dead set against China? Is it because China is outcompeting the West? Is it because of the racism that we suffer from in Europe and America and elsewhere? Is it because people feel that yellow and black people are replacing white people and they're not going to let that happen? There's a lot of malevolent feelings in the West. I think if people would come to China and experience the Chinese soul, they'd find that Chinese people are similar to people everywhere else, that they only want to be able to achieve. They only want to be rewarded for their achievement. They want to have a better life. They want to be peaceful. And so I don't think you can get that from any book, even my book, although we hint at it, and you've written many books. I think people have to come to China and see for themselves, because they'll probably be astounded by the China they see, which is so different from the way the media reports it.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. And particularly now, I think one of the reasons probably due in the past is that not many Westerners has actually traveled to China. Also, the number of students from foreign countries studying China is not really compatible to what Chinese students study abroad. You know, since open up, there's about 10 million Chinese students from Greater China studied in over, probably 100 countries, mainly US and Western countries. And then yet we don't see many foreign students coming to China. And also in recent few years, as you know, we had a COVID, right? And the China shut down for 3 years, and then many people left, and then nobody really coming as coming as the momentum as used to. So I'm very glad now because I saw in the previous report as well that the tourism has really gone up since China offered 40 some countries free visas to come to China, including the latest from Canada and the UK. So I hope that probably a gap will contradictory will be minimized, and then by having invited people coming to China, President Xi said, let's invite 50,000 American youngsters come to China, which already 40,000 has already come. So I do think seeing is believing, and that is really very useful. Of course, certainly China has a different system. A lot of people say, "Oh, you have a different system than ours." Then we must have a problem with you. But then you see now the Chinese system works well for the Chinese people, and achieve the miracles. Then I think they need to probably give the credit sooner or later, because let's really, like Deng Xiaoping said, it doesn't matter white cat, black cat, as long as it catches mice. So I think your observation is absolutely right. And I noticed in your book you also talked about on the China-U.S. relations, the Hippies trap, because you know that Graham Allison, which is a great friend of mine as well, we actually come up with a book of how to escape Hippies trap. So this Hippies trap relation is currently at historical, fitted into this relationship. But do you think that as China, as you said, doesn't want to be a hegemon of the world? So, in your opinion, what lies the key solution to prevent China and the United States from heading towards a disaster conflict? I mean, we see also what's going on in Iran right now. We see that's happening in the Middle East. We see what happened in Latin America. And we see in Asia, across the Taiwan Strait. So, what do you think? How can U.S.-China avoid Hippies trap, like Professor Graham Allison said?
I think we need more people-to-people connectivity, and you talked about the tourism numbers and the visa-free travel. That's one aspect of it. Now, your first premier, Zhou Enlai, had this model that I write about in the book called folk diplomacy, a parallel track to formal diplomacy of ambassadors, envoys, and so on. And I think China needs to, and the world actually needs to go all in on people-to-people connectivity, as talked about by Zhou Enlai. So I can tell you that over a half a century ago, on my first trip to Europe from the United States, I went to the Netherlands. I went to the tourist office. This is before computers, before internet and all that, of course. But they had a program called Get in Touch with the Dutch, and you could sign up and meet a Dutch family. So since I'm trained as a lawyer, I met a lawyer, his family, including himself, his wife, his two children. And after 5 decades, that meeting impressed me as how nice the Dutch people are, and informed me about their way of life. And I'm still touched by that. And I know that it's very important for people in America and Europe and China to meet each other as people, not as them, not as enemy, not pointing fingers at each other. But we need to find a way to work together because we have too many existential threats in the world. And I write about in the book several ideas. Now, you talked about targets for GDP growth and so on. You talked about the students and the exams that they take. Now, we know that for some students now, even top students in China, they're having some difficulty finding meaningful jobs that build on their education. And that's wrong. And I write about how China, like many other countries, should start a volunteer corps. I call it Panda Corps. Because just imagine all those people who are going to universities and are temporarily not finding the jobs that they want, how they could go overseas, how they could become informal ambassadors of goodwill, like Zhou Enlai advocated. And also, they could help themselves. They could help themselves by knowing another culture. They could help themselves, the students, by being more self-confident, by getting more interpersonal skills, and by showing foreigners that Chinese people are very much like the people who they're interacting with in the countries around the world. I'm a big proponent of this idea, and I hope that China does something like that. I also hope, and I write about it in the book, how there needs to be more contact between people, that just meeting a tour guide, just meeting a concierge in a hotel is a kind of people-to-people interaction. But we really need more deeper people-to-people interaction. And whether we do that virtually and more of it's happening virtually, or whether we do it in person, which is absolutely the better way to do this, that we need to have more contact with each other. And I think that that's very important. And it's not just President Trump meeting with President Xi. It's people like us and people at various levels meeting with each other and getting to know each other. The more we can see that we're much more alike than we are different, the more that we're going to try to build peace for ourselves, for our children, for their children, because we face so many great existential threats now, like I've mentioned. We need to work together to solve them, or we're not going to be around for much longer. So I think people and people-to-people contact are the key.
Yes, thank you, Harvey. You really hit right on. I think that I remember you mentioned about this Panda core a few times as well, before as well. That's an excellent idea. I don't think that Chinese young people now the use the young people should really form this panda call for the international, for global South countries, for Africa, for Latin America, or ASEAN and many other countries to really reach out and then trying to help. I strongly agree with you. I think this people's diplomacy, this people-to-people's diplomacy is so crucial, and actually CCG is practicing that. We are a non-government think tank, but we actually trying to reach out. We probably make the most of the trips. We receive many foreign visitors from all walks of life, but particularly also young people, university students. So this is so important that we need to work together on the people's to people diplomacy, and we have to work on that.
And I interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I very much admire what you and Mabel are doing with the Global Young Leadership Program. I think this is an excellent initiative because these people are going to be around for a long time. Many of these people are, in fact, going to be leaders in business, in government, and other fields. And so to get their attention, to help them share these values of people-to-people connectivity, to help them share the values that China espouses, whether it's in ancient Confucianism or modern win-win thinking. It's very important to get their attention and also to direct them to public service and to trying to make the world a better place. We really, I believe, are on the knife edge of deciding as a world whether we're going to be able to continue or whether we're going to blow everything up, not just by, let's say, a nuclear weapon, but by AI unchecked. Your premier has advocated already some time ago to have a UN office on AI safety. Everybody here in Europe, and I assume in the rest of the world, is talking about AI, but nobody is talking about how to promote AI so it's innovative, but how to design the proper guardrails so AI continues to be our, let's say at the moment, imperfect servant, but not become our imperfect master. That, I think, is really the challenge of our time.
Yes, thank you. I particularly appreciate you mentioned about the young people. Also, Dr. Mel's program, the Global Young Leader Dialogue, that she was leading since the pandemic. So far we have gathered 200 global young leaders from 50 countries, and we conduct annual event conferences and a great network. You're right; they are young, but then they have the future. Ahead of us. They are really the brilliant and brightest young people. I agree with you. The CCG is also trying to do some of that. For example, for the last 18 years, CCG has received and hosted many interns. We have quite a few among the audience today, and those interns are really been working with us, and many of them are very outstanding now. We went to Harvard. There are quite a few Harvard students come up and say, we used to intern at your CCG. We went to UN. We had people from UN who worked at the CCG as well. And of course, we go to other well-known university in Europe, in America. We very frequently met our interns. So that's young people investment is so important. And I can't agree with more on that point. And as a matter of fact, CCG's Global Young Leader Dialogue, since its launching for the past 6 years, we have received a reply letter from President Xi encouraging more young people, global young people, come to China, watch with their own eyes, and interact with the Chinese young people. So that's really, really important. So finally, before we open some questions for audience, I just wondering what are your expectations for the readers? And what are the seeds you wish to plant with this book of this marvelous book that you've been working for the last 3 years? So what is your suggestion and your wish, your expectation, and for this book, before we open to our colleagues?
My expectation is that people start to get an impression of the real China, of China's real history, of its important prominence in the world since the beginning of recorded history, and that they make an effort to make up their own mind through their own eyes about China today. And yes, they can consider the often erroneous Western narrative about China, but they should measure that against what they actually see, the tremendous progress that China has made, the fact that China has lifted 800 million people out of extreme poverty, the only country that's ever done that in the history of the world, and that China's people are living better than ever before, and that they're so hardworking that while there are challenges that we've discussed, that the challenges will be met by Chinese people working in conjunction with like-minded people around the world, whether it's in the global south or the global north, to address these existential issues that are facing us, that scientists and philosophers tell us that we're going to be exposed to in the next few years. So that is my hope. My hope is that we can all work together for a better planet. We need to, or we won't be here for much longer.
That's great. That's a great conclusion remarks on that topic. And now I'd like to open to our audience here. Does any of you have any questions or comments? Or
congratulations for the book, and thank you for taking the time and writing your stories and your journey here. I think you obviously are doing a very something very special, and your perspective on this issue is also very valuable. And I was wondering, there is the preface by Professor Jeffrey Sachs and by Henry, and you have personally gone through a lot of changes in China. Um, what kind of advice, if you have to give them, like the country, the people, as China is moving into closer into the center of the world with more power, more prominence. What kind of advice would you kindly offer? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you as a Princetonian and a leader in CCG for all your good work. And I follow your comments online, as do many other people. I think that we really need to try to work harder, to work together. And we have to find every avenue possible to do that. We're at a point in world history where history may not be continuing. And so what China can contribute is a lot of this ancient wisdom, but it's updated to modern time. We live in a crazy, jumbled world, and the model that we've known since the end of World War II has been changing. I mean, Mark Carney, he talked about this model changing, about the rise of middle powers getting together, about the morphing of the relationships between countries. So it's true that we're entering a new phase. I think regard to China and other countries for that matter too, exercising as much leadership in the global community as possible is important. I know that President Trump has established his Board of Peace, and I think that the Board of Peace won't and shouldn't replace the UN and the UN agencies and organizations, but that China is contributing more and more to those agencies. It has even contributed the lives of some of its people as blue helmets in conflict zones, and is now more and more taking leadership roles in the UN and various UN agencies. I think that China needs to do more of that. I think China's young people, as emphasized by Henry and this global youth leaders, young leaders dialogue, needs to help orient leaders to public service on a global basis. And I think that at a time when America is pulling back from global engagement, China and other countries need to fill the gap. And I think you are filling it. And personally, I'm very happy that President Xi and President Trump are hopefully going to meet in a few weeks in Beijing. That's a good sign. But I do think that we need more stability in our not only bilateral but multilateral relationship. And China, because it's at the crossroads of so many multilateral groupings and organizations, is really key to this. I think that more Chinese have to get involved. China's doing a very good job of getting involved in all these organizations, and it has been doing that for some time. You know, Chairman Mao was very suspicious of international organizations. He thought that they were capitalist tools to keep China and the developing world down. Now China has a completely different outlook on that. And they see the usefulness, the necessity of working together through these various forums. And you and Henry, your colleagues, are contributing to various dialogues, track 2 diplomacy, and things like that that I write about in the book. I think all these things are necessary, but we need even more of them.
Hi, first of all, congratulations on your book. And actually, I used to work a little bit with your manuscript back then when you were preparing this book. Mm. So I'm also very delighted that it's published. And so I was asking, I wondered what motivated you to write this book?
Good question. The book's been a long period in its gestation, but I'm motivated by the fact that for many years, writing all those op-eds and things and participating in various forums, that I have a unique perspective. It's not mine alone, but that very few people have had an opportunity to serve in high levels of, in my case, American government and also American media, and to then have this precious opportunity of spending decades in China, a country that's captivated me, a country which, frankly, I misunderstood from the beginning and at the beginning because of so much misinformation that was thrown at me, and which my own television network was putting forward. And having worked in the Carter administration, I have a great sense of what countries can do together and how they can work together. President Carter was underrated for many, many years. He's just died recently, of course, at a ripe old age of over 100. And history is judging President Carter much more positively than before because it recognizes his contribution, many of which involve China and interaction with China and other things like trying to mediate between DPRK and the West and so on. So I take as my example, as my shining star, President Jimmy Carter and what he tried to accomplish as president, a simple man really, somebody who was a peanut farmer, but somebody who changed the world. And then I look at people like Deng Xiaoping, who understood human nature and how to work with it, and how you had to cross the river by feeling the stones. And the follow-up that we're now seeing from the latest generation of Chinese leadership with President Xi in trying to promote global understanding and trying to promote China while also promoting the ancient values of trying to eliminate corruption and going forward in the most efficient, positive way. So those are some of the factors that I thought about when I wrote this book. Obviously, I could have written about anything, but I wanted to write this especially for young people because you're our future, because you need to get involved, because many young people are in China and elsewhere lying flat or becoming full-time sons and daughters. It's not only in your country, but it's happening in a lot of places that we need to get with the program, because if we don't, we're not going to be here much longer, like I've said several times already in our conversation. So those are some of my motivations.
Okay, great. Harvey, thank you for your excellent presentation of your book and also a great discussion we have. And I agree with you. Absolutely, you are a living example, witness the transformation that for the last half a century of China-U.S. relation, but also the transformation of China, which you and I are probably all see that the last 48 years of opening up of China, and then you came here in the midst of that in 1990s. And China has really, with per capita GDP about $100 now to the second largest economy. That's remarkable. But also, of course, we see the whole world has evolved. We're lucky to probably see the things that invented in the last half a century. All the things we've been seeing probably took a few generations or took several hundred years for previous generation to see that. And we've been waiting that. And then you want to document that. You want to really write down what you feel about that is a great thing. You are making a great contribution to the literature.
And today, we didn't have a chance to mention it because there's not enough time. But one of the things that impresses me the most about China is if you look where China was at New China's founding in 1949, and now the progress is astounding, not only in GDP, and China is first or second in global GDP, depending on which measure you use. But you look at this measure called life expectancy at birth. In the beginning of New China, the life expectancy at birth was about 35, just a bit about 35 years. Imagining your life starting and ending in 35 years. That is incredible when at that time, the life expectancy at birth in America was double that. Now, China has surpassed America in life expectancy at birth and is also basically tied with Europe. That alone, if there were a category in the Guinness Book of Records for achievement, would be in there. And that's what impresses me. That's what people in the West don't even know about. It's not on their perceptual radar screen. And that's why I think people need to go and see for themselves. It's great to do this on various social media, but seeing is believing. And so that's why I'm urging people through the book, trying to make it interesting enough so that they can know a little bit about the great things China offers, and they make their own judgment about it.
Okay, great. Harvey, on that positive note, on seeing is believing, on inviting all the young people coming to China, it's a great way to end our dialogue and conversation here. So we hope that you come back also. We look forward to seeing you soon. And thank you very much for taking your time to talk with us, but also thank the audience in this setting. But also we're going to air this as well. We're going to send audience online as well. So appreciate your time. Let's give another congratulation to our senior fellow, Harvey Dzodin, for this excellent book that you've been putting up. Thank you. And also to our
Thank you.
team here. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all. See you soon.